Hey everybody, tonight I have a very straightforward yet powerful message for you, one that could literally change your life forever. Imagine what it would be like, what it would look like to experience a life of complete passion. Imagine your connection with God, and I'm talking about a real relationship with Him that was so intimate that you recognized His voice, that you saw actual physical evidence of His presence and His moving in your life, and that each day you woke up more excited to be a part of what He was doing in the world than any other part of your day, and that your joy, your purpose was complete in Him. Imagine that the desires of the world paled in comparison with your desire of knowing God, and that the burdens and the heartaches of this life couldn't faze you because you were so grounded in your trust of God and in His promises, and because of the sweet hope and expectation of heaven that made any amount of suffering bearable and inconsequential. Imagine if that was you, if that was your passion. Because here's the sad truth about this. So many people have never experienced anything even remotely like what I was talking about. And watching this video right now, there are two types of people out there. You are either one of those who loves the one true God and you are unashamed about living your life for Him. And then there are others who think, I'm too afraid to live this life for Christ because of what people might think of me. You're afraid of your reputation being tarnished. Or you could be a person who's really just more interested in cultivating a life of luxury and comfort for yourself on the earth. And eternity is something you really don't like thinking about and really have no desire to think about. Now, I'm hoping that you're drawn to the first more than the latter. And there's a story we're going to look at with just one verse that's an example of both of these types of people and how it affects their life. And as we continue in the life of David, we're going to look at 2 Samuel 6, verse 16. We're going to continue right where we left off. And if you remember, they're bringing the Ark of the Covenant back into the center of Israel's worship. So just real quick, remember, this is a huge deal because the Ark of the Covenant represented the presence of God. It represented their very relationship with God. So as they bring the ark, here's what it says. It says, as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked out of the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. So you have two people here. You have Michal, who actually, unfortunately, is David's wife. So she looks out of her window and she sees David in the streets praising and worshiping and dancing for God because he is so in love with God and he is so excited that the Ark of the Covenant is back. And then you have Michal, who despises David, who looks at him with contempt and thinks, how could you ruin your reputation like this? People are watching you. Don't you care what they think? So you see both of these two types of people here, one worshiping and one who is scoffing and who's bitter. Now I hope your heart is drawn to David's response, because personally I think it's such a beautiful and a sweet thing to see an example of someone who is living their life with complete passion, without fear. I think it's remarkable. And let me be very clear here, because we all start on the same playing field. So, we're all sinners. We're all separated from God by our rebellion against Him. Okay? So I'm not saying these two people, you have a good person and a bad person here. Both of them are sinners. We've already looked at a lot of David's past mistakes. But the difference between these two people is their response to God, their view of God, their relationship with God. They're both sinful. But with David, he understands that he is a sinner saved by grace. And he is celebrating God's goodness and God's love while Michal could care less about being saved from anything. And in fact, I would reckon that she probably doesn't even think she has anything to be saved from. She is more concerned for her social status than her status before God. God does not captivate her heart in the least, and she has no passion because of that. Now, there's another example of someone's joy in the Lord that we want to look at real quick. One of the most incredible examples is Paul. He's the Apostle Paul. He wrote a lot of the New Testament. But I want you to listen to how he speaks about his situation and about how much he's in love with God. And please keep this in mind. This is so important. While he wrote this, he was in prison because he was a Christian. That was his crime. He was living a life fully for Jesus, and they put him in prison for it. Now, keep in mind, their prisons back then were not pretty. They're not like our prisons. They were disgusting. They're inhumane. They were quite terrifying. And a lot of people died in these prisons. Yet, listen to how he talks about God. Right out the gate, this is how he starts. In Philippians chapter 1, it says, "Yes, and I will rejoice." What? You're in prison, Paul. Your very first words are, "Yes, and I will rejoice." Are you kidding me? Do you know where you are? He does. This is what's so incredible about his passion, about his love for God, because it eclipses anything he's going through. It says, "Yes, I will rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance." And listen to this. "And it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be at all ashamed, but that with full courage, now as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or by death." Did you hear what he just said there? He is more concerned with how Christ is honored or glorified by how he's living than whether or not he's going to live or die. His love for God is so passionate, so full, that he doesn't care what happens to him. In fact, the very thing he says at the very end, he says, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." He's saying his life is all about Jesus. His whole life is basically for living for Jesus. Everything who he is, everything he's about, all his goals, his purpose is all about pleasing God, because he's so in love with who God is. To the point where he says, "Even if I die in this prison, it is gain for me, because that means I will be with him forever in heaven." That is incredible. It is an amazing thing when a soul finds its maker and finds true contentment in God. And you can see it in Paul's words. You can see it in David's dancing. And I know that you are hungering for it. It's why you're still listening to this video. Because it's that hope that a life of purpose and passion might possibly exist for you. It's the hope that God might actually take interest in your life. It's the hope that there's a community out there that is devoted to something more than just vanity and wealth and status. So, are you that scoffer like Michal, living in fear of your reputation? Or are you one who's unconcerned about eternity and more obsessed with living it up in this life? I urge you not to settle for this meager living. And yes, you heard me right. I did say settle, because you can attain all the wealth, all the status, all the pleasure possible on this earth, but it will not compare to the sweetness of being fully and truly known by God, and yet still finding forgiveness and, more amazingly, acceptance. So don't settle for anything less than knowing God and being right with him. And if you're wondering, how is that possible? Jesus. It's only possible because of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, who died for your sins and conquered death and showed that he was God by being raised from the dead. The Bible tells us it's by grace that we are saved, not by works. You can't earn it. It's a free gift that comes by faith in Jesus and by no other means. So what I'm not suggesting to you is that you go out and just increase your knowledge of God. that in itself is really meaningless. What I'm truly hoping for you is that you put your trust in Jesus and put your life, your salvation, your forgiveness in his hand. That you enter into a real, intimate relationship with him if you've not already done so. So I urge you, go search the Bible for this truth to see if what I'm saying is true, or reach out to me and I'd love to talk to you about this. Now, for those of you who are already followers of Christ, I hope that you are so encouraged by this, and I hope your heart is just pulsing with excitement and the desire to know God better. And maybe recently you found your passion waning, or maybe you've cared a little bit too much about your reputation rather than your walk with the Lord. That's okay. Remember, David did not live a perfect life, yet he was called a man after God's own heart. So for all of you, I urge you and pray that you would dance as David danced. Love you guys.